Today we are talking about affordable, really great bourbons. If you follow any YouTubers or Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts that talk about whiskey, I see it's becoming very popular to post and review allocated bottles that most people can't find and can't get their hands on unless they want to pay insane secondary market prices. I've tasted a lot of these more expensive bourbons, and while most of them, not all of them, are really good, in my opinion, there's just not enough difference to chase these things. There's so much good bourbon that you can find in any liquor store for under $50. Heck, today we're going to review two that are under $20, and we're going to start with Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. You can pick this up in any liquor store in Illinois for around $15, and it is a really good bourbon, as you can tell. I've been working on this bottle. This particular bottle is a sour mash, meaning they take part of the old mash and put it in with the new mash every time they do a new run. This is a 4-year bourbon. It's charcoal filtered. It's bottled in bond, which means there's federal oversight. There's federal bonded warehouse where this is stored by the same distiller in the same distilling season. So if you find bottled in bond whiskey, it's usually pretty good, and that's the case with this. You can find it for just $15. So let's get into a pour and get into the tasting notes on Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. All right, we got a nice pour here of Evan Williams. Let's take a little sniff. This is your very classic bourbon notes, like very caramel up front. Not too much alcohol. A little bit of oak in there. You can definitely smell like peanut shells on this. Really nice nose, not super complex. You just know you're gonna drink a good bourbon. All the classic notes. Let's take a taste. Cheers. Hit with the caramel right up front. Little bit of peppery spice on the mid palate. Finish is still going. Little oak on that finish mainly. And peanuts. That was my first sip of the day, so we're gonna take one more sip here. Now that time I got, sweetness, peanut shells, bam, right up front. Now it's getting into mid palate. We got that little bit of peppery spice and oak on the finish, little bit of hug. For 50%, still pretty smooth bourbon, and that's probably due to that charcoal filtering. But lovely classic bourbon notes. This is a good, I think both of these bourbons are going to be really good for if you have somebody come over to your house that's not into bourbon and hasn't drank a lot of bourbon. Don't give them the super high proof stuff that you love. Like right now, Booker's Country Ham is one of my favorite bourbons. There is no way I would give that bourbon to somebody who came over and said, hey, I'd love to taste some bourbon. I don't drink very much of it. That's going to totally turn them off of whiskey and bourbon. These two offerings at $15, and I picked Buffalo Trace up for $21. Theirs are going to be good, nice, easy drinkers for beginners and give them a lot of flavor and not a lot of complexity, but enough complexity. Really good. I posted on my Instagram how much I loved Evan Williams for $15 and what a great value it was. And one of our followers asked, how's it compare to Buffalo Trace? And so that's why we're doing this episode. I said, I don't know, that'd be a good side-by-side test. So let's take one more drink of Evan Williams. Yeah, you could just drink that all day long. Good balance of caramel, peanut, oak, but not too much oak. It's aged for 4 years. just a really good bourbon. Can't hardly beat that for $15. All right, let's get into Buffalo Trace. Cheers. All right, now that we've got a good pour of Buffalo Trace, let's get into it, guys. Buffalo Trace their distribution is a little spotty, and I know some people in different states have a really hard time finding it. Here in Illinois, you can pretty much walk in anywhere and find Buffalo Trace. If you ever run across store picks or single barrel offerings of it, definitely grab those. They're not much more. I find Buffalo Trace regularly at Meijer for $21. I can find it at Benny's and pretty much anywhere else for around $24 to $28, which still isn't that bad. It is a really good bourbon and one that I always have on my bar, because if somebody comes over to my house and is just getting into bourbon or doesn't know if they like bourbon, this is one of those easy drinkers with enough complexity that I can give somebody, and if they don't taste the complexity, I'm not wasting really, really high-end bourbon on them. It's a great like gateway bourbon for people, I think. So let's get into the nose. Buffalo Trace is Stag Junior, but Stag Junior is at barrel strength, right? So it hasn't been taken down. The ABV hasn't been reduced. So if you saw my review on Stag Junior, or if you didn't watch it, I'll link it below. But you'll see I usually get a lot of the same notes in Buffalo Trace that I get in Stag Junior, just not quite as aggressive and not quite so much of a kick in the nuts as Stag Junior can be. But this on the nose is very reminiscent of Stag Junior, just subdued. It's caramel, it's cherry cola, those stewed fruits. It's a really good balance of oak, and you can really get your nose in there and the alcohol is not going to knock you over. Whereas if you have Stag Junior, you get your nose in there, it's going to punch you right in the face. So let's get into a taste. Cheers. It's such an easy drinker. A lot of people getting into bourbon don't like that Kentucky hug, where they feel their esophagus and their chest kind of start to close up. This doesn't do that for me. Now, I can't tell you what it does for beginner drinkers, but I wouldn't think it would be as bad. It's lighter than the Evan Williams, but the flavors to me are better. I love the flavors of caramel and cherry cola and stewed fruit in a bourbon. You get those, you get a perfect balance of oak, and then it's just a really easy drinker. The finish isn't long, but if you go into it not looking for a really long finish, just knowing that this is going to be a good, easy drinker that you don't have to think too much about and that you can just enjoy, then you're going to love it. It is one of my favorite bourbons. I always have it on my shelf. Just going for one more sip. Yeah, it's really a beautiful whiskey, and I love what it turns into with Stag Junior. So I don't know that these two whiskeys even need to be blended, to be honest with you. They're budget bourbons. I don't know if Buffalo Trace is necessarily budget bourbon, but we have a $15 bourbon and a $21 bourbon. They're great, but this is the Whiskey Tornado, so we are gonna blend them, and we're gonna wait a couple weeks, and we're gonna see what that blend turns into, and then we're gonna blind taste it against its parts. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know, maybe that cherry cola and in the Buffalo Trace and the peanut in the Evan Williams will really mesh nicely together, and we'll come up with a fun blend, a fun budget blend. We'll see what happens. Cheers, guys.